Good morning. Good morning. Come on. Good morning. My name's Elyssa Campodoncio-Barr, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you all today. I see a lot of familiar faces. And today we're going to talk about honesty. And first I want to just reiterate thanks to our Creative Mornings team and Newfields. I hope you all get a chance to take advantage of being at this phenomenal space. And what a cool concept, right? That we're connected to 66 other cities and speakers around the globe speaking about one common theme. So to just jump right in, when I was thinking about honesty, I was thinking about what is the definition of honesty? What does it mean to me? And I was kind of forcing it, and then I wanted it to happen organically. What was I going to talk about with you all today? And as Ryan mentioned, I am the new president and CEO of Girls Inc. of Greater Indianapolis. Super thrilled. Dream job. And if for all of you who don't know, our mission is to inspire all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. And as you can imagine, in a seat like this, I do a lot of listening and hearing where we are and where we need to go as an organization. So in doing that, I've met some incredible folks. And one meeting in particular has just stuck with me as I was thinking about what to speak about in honesty. And I was meeting with this gentleman, and who's a supporter and a friend. And he said, Elyssa, when does Girls Inc. cease to exist? And I thought it was like a, what does success look like question? So I was ready for it, you know. Self-empowerment, a sisterhood of support, girls learning about healthy relationships and lifestyles and self-esteem. That will never be not needed for our girls. But really he was asking a different question. And he said, well, you know that women and girls are now graduating from high school in higher numbers than men. They're graduating from college at greater rates and even PhDs. So we've reached it. We are there. We're equal. What is Girls Inc.'s stake? And I was like really taken aback by this. And you know, you want to keep your composure because you're still doing the rounds and wanted to be kind and you know, went with the, well, you know, this isn't resonating in leadership positions, and it's particularly for the girls that we served, which are underserved girls. We have a lot of work to do, and through some stats, but it wasn't really resonating. So I couldn't sleep about this. Went home immediately, told my husband, Matt. Shout out to Matt, who's in the room. And he was just like, I know it's frustrating, but you're doing the rounds. Just live your truth. Make sure that we're making this happen in the community. So then I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and for the Girls Inc. National Conference. And it just happened to fall on the day before the Kavanaugh decision came down, which is like really heavy time for everyone, completely divisive. And I started hearing this narrative that resonated with me as well. And I kept thinking about this meeting because there's a lot of talk about due process, and I think that that's a conversation to be had. But it went beyond it, and it was a narrative about women are not only equal, but are actually hindered by women and are now at a disadvantage. So I thought we could have an honest conversation today, see how I did that, about where we are as a status of women in the world, in our country, and in our state, and talk about what we can do to continue to affect incremental change. When I was in DC, I went down this like rabid Twitter war, because that's kind of the world we're living in. Not Twitter war, but like Twitter war with my mind and looking at hashtags. And I found, honesty, that's what we're talking about. Went down this rabbit hole, and I found this one. You'll see the date here is the date of the Women's March. And our friend Piers, who's saying that he's planning a men's march to protest with the creeping emasculation of his gender by rabid feminists who's with him. Turns out a lot of people are. And this was kind of the narrative that I was seeing in DC, specifically that men are slowly but surely being an asset stripped by 21st century feminism. Gender quotas used to take jobs, gender pay gap to take money, and Me Too to take sex lives. And if you want to go down like a deep, dark rabbit hole of narrative, hashtag men's rights, really fascinating stuff. So first, I want to talk about, just give you a little bit of background about why I care about this so much and kind of where I'm coming from in my life. And I have been blessed to come from a family of matriarchs and people who highly value women, and I understand that that's a privilege that I've had that has I've ridden with that privilege and wave. And these are two of my grandmothers who really framed my life. I never had an opportunity to meet my grandfathers. Come from completely different worlds, as you can see. This is my father's family. This is my abuelita. I'm Panamanian American. And this is my grandmother, Joanne, my mom's mom, she's here. And both of them raised 4 children, did not have an education, and entered the workforce in a time when it was highly controversial. And both of them set me up to be the leader, to show what leadership of a woman really is at home and in their careers. Particularly with my abuelita, no offense to my grandma Joanne, is someone whom I look like, and that's really important to women and girls, to have people who look like them so you can aspire and relate to. I actually come from a long line of feminists. This is Elyssa Campodoncio-Barr. She was the first female attorney in the country of Panama, and my great auntie. And this is my abuelita. She was not educated, came from the country of, in the interior, is what they call it, of Panama. And she ended up being the first consul general of Chicago. She's pictured with Mayor Eugene Sawyer with a Panama hat. So doing her job to do great marketing. This is what they set me up with. These are the reasons why I decided to pursue gender justice and why I went to law school. I was highly inspired by my Panamanian roots and really wanted to work in the international context. So I had the privilege and opportunity to spend time in Chile and Tanzania and India working on women's rights and economic opportunity and political participation in areas like Zanzibar, where there was very little carve out for women in that island. So I've had a lot of great experience working with women on the ground in those countries, and they inspired me so much. They were from those countries, and they were making a huge difference. And here I was, this young American, helping out as much as I can, but I quickly understood that they needed to do this. I needed to come back home and do the same thing that they were doing in their own communities, and that was real impact. And I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Fort Wayne contingency and delegation, clearly here. So I decided to make a move back home and practice law, and I was lucky enough to practice Title IX litigation at Indiana University. And that really started my journey of trying to carve out a space for women and girls and empowerment in our lovely state of Indiana. So you might be saying, okay, great, international, forgot about these slides, sorry. Not only did my grandparents make a huge dent on me, but my mom, who I just mentioned, she was a single mom growing up. My parents divorced when I was 2, and I saw her. We went through some struggles, right? It's hard raising 3 girls. She had multiple jobs, but she made it work, and she made it somehow time to come to things like making a gingerbread house at school. And for that, I will be forever grateful. And my father, who's a huge support, lifting me up literally and figuratively forever, so much so that I had a donor meeting recently, and they said, Elyssa, I loved what your dad said on the Girls Inc. blog announcing your arrival. And I said, what are you talking about? And so I immediately went to my car after the meeting. Oh my God, what did he say? What did he say? He did this whole fanboy of, so I immediately did a face palm. But he is such a great guy, and I will always be happy for his support. So you might be saying, okay, well, women around the world, what does that look like? So the indicators are quite dark. So 1 in 3 women will experience sexual or domestic violence at some point in their lives. 15 million girls get married before they're 18. 2/3 of illiterate people in the world are female, and this goes back into the inequalities and economic opportunity for women around the world. This also affects the representation of women. Only 22% of women around in national parliaments. This rings true in the United States. And legislatures are female, affecting legislation in the way that we have perspective in those spaces. And less than 30% of characters in movies are female. 4% of women direct feature films. So we're losing a serious perspective, despite the fact that we're the overwhelming majority. So you might be thinking, okay, that's probably a picture of a developing country, and that's not who we are. But I hope that you're as appalled as I am to know that we're 49th out of 144 countries when it comes to gender equity standards. So not only are we behind our Nordic friends, who usually have very socially liberal legislation, but we're also behind our friends in sub-Saharan Africa in some instances. We're behind a country near and dear to my heart, Panama. Countries that do not have the resources that we have as the most wealthy and powerful country in the world. And that sticks with me. It sticks with me very heavily. And I think it's important, a couple things, because I'm talking about women as a homogeneous group, and I do want to just acknowledge that that is not the case, that women of color, marginalized populations are disproportionately affected by gender inequity more than others. In the interest of time, I'm talking about women in the aggregate, but I do want to just acknowledge that that is not the case. Women are not a homogeneous group. We have different perspectives and different life experiences, clearly. But this isn't 1769. We're not chattel. We're not property. We've had a lot of great milestones. We have passed the 19th Amendment. We have the right to vote. Reiterating, go vote. We're going to be celebrating the 100th anniversary of that in 2020. We have passed the Equal Pay Act. We have Violence Against Women Act. We have Title IX. A lot of incredible progress. But I still think that it's appalling that we have the first Latina congressperson, senator, ever, starting in 2017, right? We had our first female Secretary of State in 1997. The first Republican vice president who's a woman running in 2008. So incremental change truly means incremental change in this country when it comes to the equity of women. So despite that, we're the majority of the folks in this country. We are living longer, and my friend from Girls Inc. was absolutely correct. We are graduating in higher numbers, high school, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, PhDs. Department of Ed, in every demographic, racial, ethnic demographic, we are hovering around 60% of the graduates. But why is that not resonating when it's coming to leadership positions? 24 of the Fortune 500 CEOs are women. It's pretty appalling. We've also regressed a little bit. So when we're talking about some of the most powerful companies that are almost the size of countries, we are only seeing less than 5% of them led by the majority of people. I'm going to contrast the United States with Indiana just for effect, and now we're getting into where we are in our state. So 78.3 cents on the dollar is where we are in terms of gender equity in the pay gap, and this is from the Institute on Women's Policy Research. So what they do is they take comparable work, and I know some people say the gender pay gap is a little bit odd, not necessarily apples to apples, but they take comparable jobs, comparable education, year-long employment. So these are not women that are exiting the workforce to have a family, which is a very real policy question and concern. In the US, in Indiana, it's 72. So this is the national aggregate. This is where we are in Indiana, 72 cents on the dollar. In the United States, it's projected overall we will have gender equity in pay by 2053. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll get to see, I hope I do, in Indiana, 2082. Women have 15.7 more days of depression on national average for mental health. In Indiana, it's 20.1. Women are 2.2 times less likely to be in a STEM discipline, which we know has a really high impact of earnings in the future and will continue to do so. In Indiana, we're 2.6 times less likely to be in STEM disciplines. And these next two ring true across the country in Indiana. So 1 out of 4 women in the United States and girls, and I think that's really important, girls, experience sexual harassment and assault at some point in their life. So look around. You don't have to have a daughter or a mom or a niece who you know to really care about these numbers. And 20% is where we hover around political participation. That's for Indiana as well. And to me, this is not I worked in gender, women and democracy when I worked for UN Women. In Tanzania, this is not democratically representative. We are the majority of people, and we're not hearing women's perspective in crucial legislation, both federally and in our home state. This affects all of us. So overall, Indiana ranks 43rd on the equal status of women by the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Sad. Like, we can do better than that. And it's not just about the numbers. I think stories are very real. So again, Twitter is just a rabbit hole for me. And Me Too, we passed the year anniversary. But I know that that's a really politically divisive issue, and I found this hashtag, everyday sexism. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal in that it really captures everyday experiences of women and what they go through everyday sexism. The first is about visited a new dentist this morning, had an extensive exam, then at the end was handed a form for my husband to sign. I actually had a similar experience a few months ago when we had a water softener installed, and it's a very simple system. And this guy went through it with me, and you literally just push the button to regenerate it, and he apparently thought I was lost, so he said, "You look confused. So if you have any questions when you need to regenerate, have your husband call me." And it was just appalling. But this is something, this made me feel a little less alone. And again, the classic, "Come on, darling, give me a smile, 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 smile." I don't know how many of the guys in the room get told to smile randomly by strangers, but it's like something that happens. And then I think it's important, because this is really holds close to home, especially with what we do at Girls Inc. And I was a volunteer and did some of these programs where we talk about media literacy and self-empowerment. And you see, this is actually from Australia, so this is clearly a global phenomenon. But he reads the Financial Review, she peruses a fashion mag. Who dreams up and approves of this stuff? So we're putting genders in a binary box, and I think that's really problematic. And that's not to say that I don't love a good InStyle mag, like I do, but I also like reading the IBJ, and you don't see enough of that And then it happens so young. So the boys rule, girls rules. No girls allowed, no boys allowed. But the boys get to do a lot more fun stuff, in my opinion. So they get to get dirty, have fun, climb trees. And it's not that the girls don't get to do fun stuff. They get to sing songs and play pretend and read fairy tales and have tea parties. But we're setting up our kiddos for what we are projecting a woman and a man to be. And I think that is wrong on both sides. So a girl should be just as happy playing and climbing trees, just like I think a boy should be absolutely allowed to play dress up and do that freely. So why does this matter besides what I hope you think is a clear intrinsic value in equity? It matters because women, when we lift them up, affect every indicator that you can imagine. So health, education, social and economic rights fulfillment, all of these are inseparable from gender equity. So if we have more women's participation, it affects all of us. It's not, you shouldn't care about this just if you're a woman. You should care about this as a whole community and a society. And so now I know that was like really dark, and gosh, we have so much to do and a lot of work to do and opportunity to make a difference. And you can, you yourselves individually. So I think first we need to acknowledge where we are. So unlike my friend from Girls Inc., who believed that we were done, we were equal, let's acknowledge that even though women and girls are the majority of folks graduating from high school and college, that we're still not seeing that in higher levels of leadership and representation, and that we still have work to do. So that's one. Let's all acknowledge where we are as women and girls in this country and in this state. And second, engage everybody in the conversation. I think the Me Too movement is so powerful, so powerful. What happened in this country a year ago, I think, was a moment where we all took pause and thought deeply about where we are and what we're doing in our everyday lives to engage in what may not be equal treatment of women. But I think it's a mistake when we just only talk to women and like-minded people about this. So we have to engage men in this conversation, or else we're not going to get anywhere. And also engage folks who may not agree with you. I think that there's a way to have a civil conversation about this that's not divisive, because right now our country and where we are is so heavy and heated. But let's try to have conversations with one another about how we can make a difference. Have a voice, take a seat at the table. And I think we hear this a lot, but it is hard. It is hard when you are the only one to have a seat at the table and have a voice. And the first time that I had an executive leadership position, I was oftentimes the only woman in the room and the only Latin person in the room. And I started getting really introspective and thinking, what is my value? Do I have what am I going to add to this conversation? Is it going to make a difference? And I was there to lend a perspective that nobody had in that room. And if you're not going to take advantage of that, then you need to, first of all, practice. Practice as much as you can. But if you're not going to exercise your voice and really exercise the power of having that seat, then we need to make room for women who will. And I know that is a hard thing to hear, but know that you have value. You have a voice. And for the folks at the table who are not the only one, make sure that you're encouraging and opening a door and a window for those people to be comfortable and have the voice. Be inclusive. Don't just have a seat. Make sure that those people feel included in the conversation, because it's only then that they're going to exercise their perspective, and it makes the decision-making so much more powerful and better. Pay attention, vote, run, support by this. I mean, pay attention to what's going on around you. Open your eyes and ears to what folks are talking about policy-wise. To reiterate, Ryan, please go vote November 6th. It is so important. And I know that federally it overwhelms the stage, but pay attention to what's happening in our lovely Indianapolis community and at the state level, because that's where you are really going to feel the impact of what's going on. And it is so important that you engage. And if you are up for it, run. The 20% number is not going to get any better unless we have women who step up and folks who support them to really exercise our perspective and our democratic right to be represented. And support. Knock on doors. Talk about folks who are doing things well. And that's just as important as any of those other bullets. Mentor and be a champion. This goes for everybody in the room, women and men alike. Some of my most powerful, impactful mentors in my life have been men. They've been people who've taken a chance on me. They've opened a door. They've provided a seat at the table and pushed me to really exercise my voice when I was getting introspective and getting inside my head and saying, does my opinion matter? They've texted me and said, you're a gladiator. You have something to say. Say it. So do that. Don't just give advice, that's amazing. Be a mentor, we need more of them. But really lift women up as well. Make them feel included. And I hope that doesn't sound paternalistic, but I really do think it's going to take all of us to carve out spaces for women so we don't have 24 out of 500 CEOs that are women, that we have parity. And always challenge the status quo. When someone is catcalling someone across the street, question why. When you hear someone tell a woman to smile, ask, challenge that. Be courageous. Growth and comfort do not coexist. Exercise that. Challenge the status quo. Easier said than done, but so important. And with that, I would love to be a part of the conversation of Q&A. Thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciated being with you, and I look forward to the more robust change that we're going to have in this state when it comes to the equality empowerment of all women throughout the globe and in Indiana and Indianapolis. So thank you.